All right, Backyard Professor back at you. I listened to a phenomenal 3-hour discussion with Julian Dory. He had the astronomer and biblical scholar Hugh Ross on his program. Now, this was a couple of years ago, and I haven't hardly seen anybody talking about it. Wonderful discussion, really interesting. Now, you have to understand something about me. I like seeing as many possible views as I can, not in order to believe or disbelieve, but it's good to not just read books that you already agree with any more than it is to just listen to people who believe like you do. If you want a real education, Nietzsche got it right. Surround yourself with people who think differently than you do, and you'll get a real education. So this particular discussion, there are some things I truly do agree with Ross on. There's other things that I just don't agree with Ross on. And that's what made this discussion so fantastic. Julian did a great job interviewing him. 3 hours. I'm only going to touch just a couple of the ideas. Highly recommend you watch it. So let's get going. Let's take a look at what Ross is up to, shall we?
Other big case that he actually just...
Oh, I must say at the beginning, he is talking about James Fox's documentary, and they're trying to discuss the idea of UFOs.
Made a documentary on Moment of Contact, which we did another podcast, number 139, specifically on that one.
Aqui, ó. Aqui, ó.
Here.
Aqui, ó. Aqui, ó.
Here.
Aqui, ó. Aqui. Aqui, ó. Aqui, ó. A cerca da casa era aquela, ó. Foi aqui que caiu. Se eles morreram aqui.
In that case, one of the sightings was the message was, you humans have no idea what your potential is. And so I point these out because neither of these are negative things. Neither of these are satanic things to say to somebody, right? And so
what Ross has come out and told Julian is he thinks that the aliens and the UFOs are demons.
So doesn't that put a little bit of a hole in that argument that it's always negative?
Well, for example, this is not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for thousands of years. And so, like, you've got the Irish talking about leprechauns. I mean, they appear in different forms. What I find interesting is that with the UFO phenomena, it was slow-moving dirigibles in the atmosphere 100 years ago. World War II, it was the Foo Fighters moving at the speed of sound. Today, they're moving at 25,000 miles per hour. They seem to be keeping pace with our aircraft technology, and they keep changing their story. 100 years ago, they said we're from the backside of the moon. When the lay public became aware that's not credible, they said, well, we're from Venus. When people became aware of how warm it is on the surface of Venus, they said we're from Mars. Now they're saying they're from another planetary system. So the fact that we see the stories changing and the
when did they say, just brush up my history a little bit, when did they say Venus and Mars? Like, when are some of those sightings? Are those, I assume, pre-World War II?
That's pre-World War II. Yeah, and after World War II, they were saying Mars. But when you get to yeah, but when you get to the 60s and 70s, they were saying, no, we're from a planetary system.
I mean, I believe you, but I mean, not that I know all these cases at all. I definitely don't. I just wasn't familiar with cases since World War II where there was being saying where they were from.
Well, again, you'll find phenomena. And this, if you go back 1,000 years, that wasn't happening at all. Mainly because, people weren't interested in aerial phenomena. They had no experience of aerial phenomena. So only when humans were engaged in aerial phenomena do we see UFOs. So they're basically trying to manifest themselves As I said, 100 years ago, dirigibles. World War II, Foo Fighters. Now they're moving as fast as our fastest spacecraft.
What are dirigibles?
Oh, that would be, like the Goodyear blimp.
Oh,
So
that's a new word for me. I didn't know that one. Okay. So they were moving. That's kind of slow, no?
That was slow, yeah. But I mean, it's the first aerial phenomena that humans are really familiar with.
Yeah, because you also don't really have anything to compare it to.
Yeah.
Okay, so this idea is really interesting. I'm honestly not sure about the claim from then they began saying they were from Venus and Mars either, but then I'll look into it if that's necessary. But to make my point, I'm about to, it's not. The witness, and this is the value of studying the books. This is the value of seeing the records. This is the value of studying the history of UFOs, because it's true that in the earliest times of our conquering the air, the images that were claimed to be UFOs matched what we were putting up in the air. And then that changed the more our air power changed. And I think that's extremely interesting. They evolved in time with the way we have seen them in history through time. And as he says, also, he says, in the ancient times, they didn't talk at all about ancient aircraft, really, not very much. Instead, they put it in terms of good angels and fallen angels. And he emphasizes the fallen angels. Now, they never do identify the biblical verse or chapter. Of course, it's Genesis 6, the fallen angels theme, which is elaborated on in several YouTube videos. I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. So let's keep watching, see what else he comes up with. I thought that was an extremely powerful point to make.
Also discovered that these were scientists that were involved in occult research.
Okay, here is where he's talking about his visit to Russia as an astronomer and a Christian. And they really were intrigued about him being a Christian, but they said, don't talk to anybody about Christianity except our scientists. We accommodate them. But he had several different lectures that he could give, and they usually chose his Christian and UFO lectures. So this is the context of his comments here.
That was a time when the Soviet Union was sponsoring occult physics.
Can you explain occult to people who aren't familiar?
Well,
I always say occult, by the way. I don't know if that's, am I pronouncing that wrong?
no, it's occult, O-C-C-U-L-T. It's basically tools that people develop to try to contact extraterrestrial beings. Like a Ouija board to try to contact an angelic being, seances, astrology. These are examples. And these are things that the Bible explicitly forbids. It's like, hey, you want a supernatural encounter? Don't go to these angels, come to me.
Okay, and just for the record, I've done biblical research, at least on the astrology angle, and here Dr. Ross is just wrong. The ancients in the Bible and the Jews absolutely were involved in astrology. We actually do have archaeological remnants of this in the Dura Europos synagogue floor and several other synagogues that have been archaeologically excavated. They were definitely doing astrology, not as a source of occult knowledge, but as understanding the heavens, just so you're aware of it. He is coming at this from a he's not a fundamentalist Christian, because he does believe in old earth creationism. He's not one of these 6,000-year-old earth Christians. He realizes that there have been millions and billions of years involved in earth and in the universe, but he's still a creationist, just so you know. So yeah, I wanted to throw that out to you. My studies have certainly discovered the ancient Jews truly were astrologers, and in fact, I have an exquisite, interesting group of texts and scholarly articles showing how Abraham himself was an astrologer. Just to let you know, there are other accounts. There are other interpretations of this. So let's keep going. This gets really interesting. I appreciate him expounding on this.
And
Don't go to these angels.
well, the Bible tells us there's two categories of angels: the righteous angels and the fallen angels. And the Bible warns us the fallen angels are out to harm you. They're out to deceive you.
How'd they fall?
Well, they rebelled against God, just like Adam and Eve rebelled against God.
So they're not humans.
They're not humans. They're
But
angels.
They're angels, so they're supernatural, and they're supposed to emanate from a place allegedly where none of this. You said it way better than I'll say it earlier, but like none of these laws apply. None of these. We don't have to be in families and stuff like that. So how could they fall? I don't understand. Like, aren't they above falling?
Well, they fell spiritually. We're not talking a physical fall, a spiritual
Yeah,
fall.
yeah, I know,
Where they
I know.
said, hey, we know God created us, but we don't want to submit to him anymore. It was Satan who said, I want to be like the Most High. I want to be the one in charge. And so he rebelled against God, and it tells us that he led a third of the angels in rebellion with him. And so they're in a battle with God and the righteous angels. But their target is to deceive as many human beings as possible. And their strategy is, we're going to offer humans power in return for truth. We're going to take truth away from them, but we're going to give them power. He says these humans, they're suckers for power. They all want power.
Boy, sounds like the fallen angels have come back into the governments of the world today, doesn't it?
And so that's kind of their strategy. And that's why they appear in these forms saying, hey, we can give you advanced technology. We can help you with your problems. But you do pay a price. There is deception.
So why would, surprised this didn't come up earlier, but like, why would God create supernatural angels under, I guess, similar constraints, or at least on the same wavelength type constraints as he does humans, where they have the will to not be an angel anymore? Do we have a good explanation for that?
Well, and we talked about this earlier. He created us human beings with strong free will so that strong love would be possible. God wanted strong love relationships with his creation. He had the same goal for the angels. He wants strong love relationships with the angels, which means he granted them strong free will. And he knew ahead of time some of them would use their free will to rebel against him. But it's like, hey, I want strong love. I'm willing to have this happen, where some choose not to relate to me.
Very interesting theological ideas on how what he's going to do now is he's given Julian a little bit of a biblical lesson, kind of fun. And so what he's going to do is he's going to tie this angelic idea back to the UFOs. Interestingly, I did not know this about Hugh Ross. He doesn't believe in the physical UFOs. I know, right? I can hear you saying, but wait, yeah. So, and this is why he's giving this exposition to Julian and why he is equating the UFOs, the aliens, with the fallen angels. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So let's go on with the next part of this.
Is where you see people deeply involved in the occult and trying to gain these supernatural powers, that's where you see a very high incidence of UFO events. So, and you even see that here in America. There's certain states where we see a higher rate of experiences of UFOs than you do in other states. But it's proportional to the percentage of the population that's involved in the occult. And the Bible tells us these evil angels, they need permission. They cannot touch you unless you give them permission. And you give them permission through your occult experiences. So the book we wrote, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, we say it's a scientifically testable explanation of UFOs.
And there's always a book. So this is the last idea that I would like to discuss just briefly. I find it very interesting, but I don't think the evidence bears him up. Now, he is approaching this, of course, from a certain, Christian theological stance. So that's not a big deal to me. I wouldn't have cared if he'd approached it from a Jewish or an atheist or whatever. It's the fun of seeing another point of view that makes this so delightful for me. So because of his Christian background and because of his absolutely impressive background of astronomy, he is definitely a scientist. Hugh Ross is one of the good ones. Sincerely, he's a great guy. I like him a lot. But this biases him to only look at certain aspects of the phenomenon. Now, he also does discuss Jacques Vallée and that particular stance where he says Vallée is also of the opinion that the UFOs, the aliens, are not good for us, that they are demons, that they're enemies, so to speak, right? And so he says those areas in the world that practice the occult the most have the most UFO sightings. I didn't hear him at all bring up some of the evidence that does kind of temper that approach, that gives us a much, much more broad background. And perhaps I think he does understand. I would be surprised, I'll put it this way. I would be surprised if he did not realize that there are different species of aliens that the UFO researchers and scholars and the UFO community have come up with, right? The one blaringly different story that does not support his point of view is going to be Chris Bledsoe's UFO of God. He does not see them as fallen angels at all. And his lady that keeps visiting him is the feminine, the divine feminine, the Holy Spirit, which amazingly enough, because of Margaret Barker's materials, I've got her over here. I won't pull her book out unless I can see it real quick. I don't see it. You've seen it. I've done it in other videos. The divine feminine is the Holy Spirit. And I do mean the Holy Spirit of the Trinity. That is a genuine early Christian belief with some of the early Christian groups. Now realize that early Christianity itself was also not entirely unified. We say, well, the early Christians, as if there's just one group. That's simply not true. Not by a long shot. They had Essenes and Gnostics and Jews and Therapeutai and Greeks, the Chorophoroi, and there were all kinds of different groups. Elaine Pagels, in her very famous interview with Bill Moyers years ago, said that when she began to study early Christianity, the thing that blew her away the most was that there was as much diversity in Jesus's day of different religious groups as there are right now today. We have Baptists and Lutherans and Episcopalians and Catholics and Mormons and Jews, and there's just thousands of different groups. It was pretty much the same thing in the Judaism of Jesus's day. So the other part that I want to share with you that I think is even every bit as strong as Chris Bledsoe's point of view, simply because this is happening in an entirely different area in the world. Now, I don't have access to a lot of information on the UFOs and the visitation of the UFOs in Africa or Australia or the UK or over there in Russia or China or Japan, etc., right? But I absolutely do have two very powerful sources by this author, Artie Six Killer Clarke, space age Indians and the sky people. And she says, without question, that, and she gives stories from actual eyewitnesses of UFOs and their visitation, that there are thousands of UFO visits to the poorest people on the planet. And they're humble farmers. They're just eking out a living farming a half an acre of land, or else they're little village merchants or whatever. Oh, and then while I'm thinking about it, I do have another one that I forgot to mention. This one, the other group that is absolutely not into the occult at all are the Hopis. And Gary David's phenomenal discussion of the Orion Zone in the desert cities of the American Southwest, the Hopis, show that the UFOs are the ones that brought the Hopis to the earth, and that they are the ancestors. They are the descendants of the UFO people, the star people, and they call those the Kachinas. And Ma'asa is the main deity, as it were, the main alien of that, and he helped lay out their cities across the desert there. And they are not into the occult. They just have a different religion than we do, than Christianity does. So my proposal would be this. Hugh has some exquisitely interesting ideas. He's a delight to listen to. He's always calm. He's just, he's saying it like he understands it, which is perfect. There's no rhetorical shenanigans. There's no trying to wheedle an idea out or sneak in something through a lie or a fib. Or he's not manipulating sources. He's not as broad with the actual evidence as I would like to have seen him be. I believe I have a broader understanding in that regard than he does. When it comes to astronomy, I'm unworthy to even bend over and untie his shoes. But on the UFO stuff and all, I will say I don't think he's accurate at all. And that's not to say that he is a bad guy. That is not to say that he is public enemy number one of UFOs, etc. All of this divisiveness that we have in our world right now, that's not why I'm critiquing Dr. Ross at all. He is a legitimate doctor, a very good one. He's just wrong about the UFOs. The reason I would propose, and I do believe this comes out in this interview, it certainly comes out in his various books that he's written, is he is basing all truth upon his understanding of what the Bible and Christianity teaches. But I mean, there's even other Christians who are going to disagree with him, just like there are other ufologists or researchers like myself who disagree with some of his conclusions on the UFOs. The reason he is calling the UFOs demons is because anything that's not in the Bible or his version of Christianity is going to be demons. That is standard, traditional Christian methodology. Us, we have the true God. Everyone else's gods are demons. That's how they've done it traditionally and historically. And so that's what he's bringing into this really cool subject, UFOs and aliens. I just simply disagree with him. And this is where the multiple species of UFOs could come into play. And I mean, even that is so bizarre, I'm still wrapping my head around that. Sincerely, I want what's real. But different species of UFOs you got the lizard people, the reptilians, as hecklefish on AJ's Wi-Fi. You got to say it right. You got to have the lizard people. I can't help it. I love hecklefish. And then you've got the Nordic tall whites. And then, of course, you have the grays. And are different researches out there. I believe Richard Dolan talks about this in his UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. That talk about there are some species, perhaps, that are less than friendly to humans, without question. I mean, some of the abductions are horror stories. I feel for those people. There are other aliens, perhaps, that are good according to the Bledsoe version and according to Clark. She describes how there were several healings of people who were truly ill from Agent Orange from the Vietnam War through no fault of their own. And the aliens healed them of that. And then they have gone on and saved their children in some instances, etc. And they are building up the people. They are helping the people. They are not injuring them. They are not deceiving them. And none of these people are into the occult stuff. They just, technically, they're Catholics. Catholicism conquered them, centuries ago, and they haven't gotten off of that. But even the Native Americans and their religions, the UFOs are visiting them as well. So that would be my approach to this. So I think overall, this was a delightful discussion. It's really cool to see different approaches to this subject. I really appreciated the fact that Dr. Ross did bring in his understanding and interpretation of Christianity and the Bible, more or less. And so anything to broaden the context, I am all for. That doesn't mean that everything that does broaden the context is going to be accurate. No, of course not. But it does help us be able to learn how to discriminate, to learn how to weigh and test and see what fits better with the evidence that we have. So thanks for watching my Backyard Professor Responds videos. That's my response tonight. I will be back shortly because I've always found more stuff for you that I find enjoyable, very interesting and intriguing, and always uplifting, I hope. That's tough to do in our world these days. So I will catch up to you guys shortly. I hope you have a blessed and a glorious evening and the rest of the week. See you soon.